Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the FIPWiSE and Fearless podcast. I'm joined today by the fabulous Professor Christina Chai, who's joining us from Singapore. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Hi, good.
Fabulous. Christina, I would try to introduce you and go through your career pathway, but I certainly wouldn't do it justice. Tell us about your career. How did you get here today?
This is a very long journey, and maybe I'll start at the beginning, and hopefully it wouldn't take too long. So I grew up in Malaysia, and I actually was educated mainly in Malaysia, but in the last year of my high school, went to New Zealand, followed by my undergraduate studies there and my PhD at the Australian National University in Australia. This is followed by a postdoc in University of Oxford in the UK. And after that, I kind of saw a job advert as a lecturer in Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand. And I thought, what the heck, let's give this a go. So that's what I did. I went over to New Zealand. I started my academic career more or less by accident, not by planning. And after that, I went back to my alma mater, which is the Australian National University. And I had a pretty long career over there. I had a tenured position, but because of family issues, I needed to be closer back to Asia. And so I applied for a job that was very, very different to an academic position. I joined the Agency of Science and Technology and Research in Singapore. So they were starting out a new research institute, and I was meant to build a research program which was based on chemistry, but there were aspects of medicinal chemistry, polymer chemistry, and the works. So that's what I did for quite a number of years. And in 2011, I decided that actually my heart was still in academia. So I went back to the university setting, now to the Department of Pharmacy at the National University of Singapore. That's where I am now. And I've been the head of department there since 2016. So it's been nearly 6 years. Yeah.
That is quite a journey, and taking in multiple countries, multiple continents. I mean, can you reflect on the ways of working, whether there were any challenges that you faced as a woman in any of these different organizations or countries?
I reflect on that quite a bit, because I was thinking that my life seems to be very ironic. The difficulties and the challenges I faced as an academic in New Zealand and Australia was because I'm an Asian woman in a Western academic setting, right? And then I moved back to Asia. And then my challenges was because I'm an Asian woman with Western thinking, okay, in an Asian academic setting. So this is kind of like the story of my life, right?
You can't do right for doing wrong. Oh.
So there are loads and loads of issues associated with this. It's basically in both ends, it's culturals and it's the expectation from my colleagues. Okay. So when I was in a Western academic department, I might seem to be extremely obedient, whereas in the context of in Asian academic environment, it would seem that I'm very outspoken. So I need to get it right somehow, maybe in another 10 years' time.
And were you acutely aware of this at the time, or is that something you think on reflection, perhaps how these perceptions were you aware that was how people were thinking about you, or how people were seeing you, and did you kind of respond to that?
I think that I realized this upon reflection right now. When I first moved and worked in Australia and New Zealand, I never really thought it to be any different. When I started my first academic career, very different to the age where people normally start right now. I was 26 years old. So I was really pretty young, and I had no clue really what was expected as an academic. But as I said, I felt that I grew and matured with time. So I did spend a lot of years in Australia, New Zealand, UK, and so on. And so when I moved back to Asia, I felt a little bit displaced in a lot of ways. And it took a while before I recalibrated myself. Yeah, and that was hard.
Why was that hard? Did you feel like you were having to restrict yourself, or?
Yes, it's because of what you were used to. I felt that in Asia, there are certain expectations of you as a woman. Whether it is for better or for worse, there is some sort of expectations. In the departments where I was in Australia and New Zealand, they were really lovely. They were really, really lovely. And I did not really need to adjust very much, except mentally, in a sense. It's just a confidence thing, really.
Wow. So confidence is, so we talk a lot about having confidence in your competence. And I think we certainly all feel a lack of confidence at some point in our career, in our days, in our weeks, even those of us who feel like we have plenty of it. Do you find that sometimes you have issues with having confidence in your competence, even now?
Always.
Me too.
It's really pretty much like what a number of women have faced, right? It's a sense of not being good enough. And I guess there is really no solutions to this in my own sense, except when you have people who truly believe in you. And that's when you feel better. It's the belief and the trust. And it can come from anyone, right? It can come from your students, your colleagues, your bosses, and whosoever. And I think that in general, women are less confident than men in general.
Do you think we're trained that way? I think that, you know, we're told from a young age that we can't do certain things. My daughter's 5; she's already been told by the boys in her class that she can't do certain things, which is just infuriating. Big believer that equality, like charity, begins at home, and these are things that we need to address from the bottom, from a young age, as well as from the top. Christine, we spoke on a panel together maybe 2 years ago. I don't know, it was before COVID, BC, and you used a wonderful phrase. You said that we should focus on being good rather than being great. And I think we were all captivated by that. Where does that come from, and how do you put that into practice?
I guess that when I thought about this, I thought about the things as a leader that I would like to achieve and how important it was to me. And then I look at other leaders who were given the opportunities and what they decided to do with the opportunities. And the bottom line is kind of like this, right? I think that we need, as a leader, whether you're a man or a woman, basically to do the right things. So you need to do good, right? But a lot of people are fixated with the status and the power that comes along with leadership positions. You're hoping to be great, okay? But I think that when you aspire for the wrong set of things, you kind of lose the plot entirely. And this is basically the message that I wanted to convey. Don't lose sight of yourself, right? Your own values and everything else that makes you you, okay? Don't be deceived by the so-called power that you would get in making decisions. Because end, right? And you'll be nothing. But doing good and doing the right things, okay, will stay forever. If not to you, but at least to the people that you've actually really genuinely tried to help. And that's basically where I was, what I was trying to say.
It's a wonderful sentiment, and I completely agree. Focus on purpose. Whatever you do, do good.
Yes.
There should be much, much more of that. Let's talk about the pandemic, Christina. How has that impacted your workload, your workplace, your well-being? How have you been?
I think I told someone recently, I've been pretty unlucky in my 6 years as head of department. 2 of this is during the pandemic. Okay. So you can imagine in 2020, in about February 2020, when, you know, all these things started to become much, much more serious, the university had to take significant measures to ensure the safety of the staff and students. Actually, we were very near exam times, and you can imagine that suddenly we are told that we would have to do teaching online, assessment online, almost like, you know, within a very short period of time. And that was very, very stressful. It was stressful for my colleagues, but of course, that stress actually filtered down to me because I was the head of department. Okay. And so there were many, many issues associated with that in the first year of 2020, because although my colleagues were all computer literate, right, but you're asking at a level that is, you know, beyond just, you know, doing PowerPoint slides and so on, right? You're talking about exam proctoring, you're talking about quizzes that you need to make sure were secure and everything else. And this was hard. This was hard. It was harder than you could ever imagine for a lot of us. Then come 2021 and everybody's tired, right? So deep down, there are people, colleagues of mine, who haven't been able to visit, to go back home. Some of them, their parents have passed away as well, and they couldn't even attend the funeral. So a lot of them were frustrated, they were angry. They were not angry at me, okay, but it just appears like they were angry at me. You know, I just feel all that frustration. And it is still a very difficult time, but Singapore has opened up a little bit, okay. So at least there is the option to go away if you wanted to go home if you wanted to. And just having the option basically calms a lot of people down. So I felt that the pandemic, from a department point of view, was really almost the worst time ever that I've had in my 6th year of being the head of department, because there were so many issues. There were so many people that, in a sense, that I have to check up on. And then there was a huge exodus of people resigning, and then we had to recruit, and everybody, you know, it's a whole perpetual thing that that has now, I hope, touch wood, stabilized. So for my personal self, actually, there was one time where I felt that this is like really bad. I can't see my relatives in New Zealand. I can't see my relatives in Malaysia. And you just felt that this was a very lonesome journey, whatever it was. And it actually struck me at that time that perhaps it's time to just call it off, you know, and just go back to New Zealand or something where my family is, and just join them. So the pandemic made you think about these things. It made you think about your priorities in life, right? What is important and what is not. But mostly, I felt for my colleagues. Okay, I felt for my colleagues, but there was nothing I could do to help them, and that was kind of that.
And I think, Christina, this reflects what you were saying before around, you know, doing good and looking after people and looking out for people. And you know, the people around us who support us and who give us confidence in our competence, they are our tribe. And we've got to do everything that we do to everything we can do to look after them, because they will look after us. Who are the people in your tribe? So who has helped you the most in your career?
Okay, I guess that when I was in Australia and starting out my career in academia, there was this person who is now an emeritus professor. Her name was Mary Garson. Her name is Mary Garson, sorry. So she was the person who really helped me, because she was a person who would encourage me, basically, that not to give up. Academia, when you don't understand it, is really quite hard, right? And going back to your earlier question, you never feel that you are ever good enough in academia anyway. There's somebody who publishes a better paper, get higher, more grants, etc., etc. This person told me that that when I asked her about things like, should I apply for promotion, she goes, yes. Then I would say, but I may not be good enough. She says, you are definitely good enough. You should just try it. Okay. And so she would give me these pep talks. Actually, it's almost like she's telling me off. but that kind of helped, right? Okay. Because she basically said, of course you're good enough. She was so sure, right? And this goes back to this thing about belief. When somebody believes that you can do it, you start to believe that you can do it. And that was special. So for me, in terms of my career, she was the single person who actually, in a sense, meant that I did not quit what I'm doing right now. And I'm sure a lot of people, especially women in academia, they would have thought about quitting a lot of times, right? So Mary was the person who encouraged me. And I don't talk to her that often, but I might see her in conferences or might drop her an email. She's very strongly supportive of women academics.
Is it almost like you can hear her sometimes when you think, shall I do this? Shall I not do this? Have you got the voice of Mary just on your shoulder?
Yep. Absolutely.
We all need those people around us. So my wife has made me something for, I don't know if you can see it behind me. It says, always remember how bloody brilliant you are. And I've taken a picture of that. And if I'm ever speaking to someone who's not having a great day or is having issues with their confidence, then I send them this picture. Always remember how bloody brilliant you are. Have a breath and have a go. So reflecting back on your career as an academic by accident, I think there's a book in this, Christina. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
I guess that I would say that you should always follow your dreams. I don't regret being an academic, but I see my young colleagues starting right now. It's really hard, It's really, really hard. And you really do need the passion. And I would say that for women in academia, it is doubly hard, for sure. So my young colleagues in the department where I am, I have no doubt it's a struggle for them to juggle everything in their lives. Okay. But I would still do it, again, because I just get so much pleasure in the research. The thing that I would tell my 25-year-old self is that, are you sure you want to do any administration? Because that's really hard. And I don't really know how rewarding that is. You just go through this whole number of years where you just feel that you are just beating your head against a brick wall, right? And I think you do it for personal growth, in the sense that you do it because you know you will grow as a person when you take up leadership roles. But it is really, really hard, because you really have to make hard decisions. You don't keep everybody, you don't let your emotions get to you, but you need to find a balance where you are really being professional and yet you are actually making a decision that is semi-compassionate, I would say. Okay. And that's hard.
So you talked earlier about the issues that you faced as a young woman and a young Asian woman. Have you seen that those have changed over the years? So the young women that are within your department, or the young Asians within your department, are they facing the same issues that you did?
I think the issues that they face is really about the expectations of a woman in an Asian society, where they are the bulk carers for their children or their parents-in-law. So that's the additional burden associated with it. And academia is not a profession where you can just switch off at 5:30, right? Because there are really going to be papers you need to read or write or whatever. So it's like never ending. So it's really hard to juggle. I don't know. I guess I don't really know how they view their life would be right now, and also whether they have possibilities in the future. But a lot of them really have significant leadership potential, in my view. Okay, I just feel that the problems that they would face would be to juggle everything, right? And it's significant. The load is significant at home, at work.
Yeah, it's the burden, isn't it? Burden of care, as well as the increasing burden of work. And the burden of work certainly doesn't seem to have depleted it all through the pandemic. Christina, you've moved around a lot in your career. You said, and you decided to go to New Zealand, and then you took an opportunity to go to Oxford, etc. Yeah. The confidence and competence piece goes hand in hand with, feeling the fear of feeling imposter syndrome. So, Christina, the name of this podcast is FIPWiSE and Fearless. My daughter Maya normally joins us for this section of the podcast, because when she goes to school every day, I ask her to have fun and be fearless. So, Maya, have you got a question?
Yes, I got a question.
Yeah.
Christina, when have you been fearless?
If you ask my colleagues, they would tell you that I'm fearless all the time, but it's not true. I'm fearful all the time. Okay, it's just that I appear to be fearless in what I have committed to do. My most recent, the challenge of me being fearless, I would say, was when I took up my headship position 6 years ago. And this, I felt, and I think I've written about this in the blog, I really felt like an imposter. Firstly, I am not a pharmacist as a head of pharmacy, okay? And I felt that this is like really hard, and I don't know whether I would be accepted. That was one thing. And the second thing was that I basically was a person who came from overseas with very different values, as I have mentioned earlier on. Okay, and that was the other thing. But because there were people who believed in me, I took up the challenge. But to all my colleagues, they will think that I was fearless. And I recently became fearless in their eyes again because I took up a third term of my headship. Okay, I did this because I felt there was no other better options for the department. And in my mind, I was very fearful. And I was actually pretty upset about the possibility of taking a third term. And I reconciled myself to this. I thought very hard about this. And I thought that to remind myself what I had said before, that I just need to do the right things. Okay. I can only do the right things. I cannot guarantee the outcome at the end of the day.
Christina, sometimes it's the piece around appearing to be fearless. Sometimes all we need is that armor. We need to put on that front, and that's good enough to make us feel fearless. And a lot of time for me, it is my shoes. I can put on the shoes and think, okay, so the armor is going on. It's all about perceptions, isn't it? And interesting to hear from you the two sides of the perceptions. So the perceptions from your students and your colleagues is that you're fearless all the time, but the perception from you in taking the role in the first place is that you might not be good enough, or you might not be accepted because you're not a pharmacist. How did you reckon with that piece of, I'm not a pharmacist, but I'm still gonna go for this? And how long did that imposter syndrome stay when you were in role?
So this is a loaded question, right? Because it was with me for a very long time, because there were people who let it be known that I was not a pharmacist and I should not be in the role. Okay. And I remember I have a leadership team that I talk to. And at one stage, everything would be prefaced with, you don't know you're not a pharmacist, okay? And then I'm like, oh my God. I came to this point where I banned that statement. I said, no, do not tell me that, okay? And it was only after about halfway through my headship, which is 3 years down the track, that I was the one who brought it up. And he said, because I'm not a pharmacist, I can tell you this, right? And it became a joke, right? Because it started when I just felt that I was not good enough. People were telling me I was not good enough because I'm not a pharmacist. And then I realized the strength was because I was not a pharmacist, I could see certain things that other people could not see. And then I had the support of the president of the Singapore Pharmacy Council, who truly believed in me. He truly believed in me. He said, because you are not a pharmacist, you are trying so much harder, and you are trying to lift the department to a level that we didn't even think was possible. You wanted to change the department, okay? And I think, again, this is where I felt that if you have somebody who believes in you, it can go a very, very long way, extremely long way.
Yeah, we need those sponsors, those backers, those advocates for us in all roles. Yeah, the strength in seeing things from different perspective, I think that cuts across all roles and all industries. The diversity of thinking. But the cheek of people to start a conversation, you're not a pharmacist. It's just, and to think that was acceptable, it's absolutely ludicrous.
It's because we've had a very long history where it's never been heard that the head of department was not a pharmacist. And I just think it's basically, it was an expectation. So it disappointed a lot of people. But the department where it is now, I don't think they even bat an eyelid, because it has become almost like a norm, in the sense that they are used to the fact that I'm not a pharmacist. But I will say that it is a joke, because I was really so sick of hearing it in the first year that I really did not want to basically hear that at all. And then I was the one who brought it up again 3 years later.
I'm hoping you're starting a tradition.
Yep.
So Christina, I'm a firm believer that those of us who are in positions of leadership should use our power, our platform, and our privilege for good, not necessarily for great, but certainly for good, and to make things better for other people. What are the things that you are doing with your position, your power, your platform to make things better for other women in science and education?
So this is really kind of interesting, because at the end of the day, I have I've wondered about whether I have made any difference. Okay. Part of me realized that some of my influence, so to speak, okay, is secondary. It's not something that I deliberately do. And it is as a result of the fact that I am a woman in academia. And in Singapore, there probably wouldn't be very many. Okay, that's not completely true, because I've been in certain sort of roles even when I was in my position in A-Star. And as a consequence of them, people remember me when they come up to me. That, like, I was having coffee at a university and somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, I remember you when you were doing this, and I'm having problems. Would you be able to advise me?" Okay. And she had a lot of problems where she was. And I had people coming up to me, women who come up to me and tell me, I have no idea who they are. "Oh, I heard you talk over this. I was really inspired," etc., etc. It kind of makes me feel good, but it kind of also freaks me out a little bit, right? It's like you can't really misbehave. So I guess that from that point of view, I think that by accident, I have become somebody that women really do know. I'm also the jury president of the L'Oreal Women in Science Fellowship. So I've been the jury president for quite a number of years. So I interview a lot of these women, right? A lot of the women, they're really high-flying women. So they would remember me even if they didn't get shortlisted. Okay. So that's kind of like another platform. But the reality is that as the head of department, I treat everybody fairly. But I like to think that I try and mentor the women who basically have the potential to be leaders. I feel they need to, because it's important to have a next generation of women leaders.
Thank you, Christina. This has been marvelous. An accidental academic and an accidental inspiration. All by doing good, doing the right thing all the time. Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much. And keep being fearless.
Thank you.